up, New Hope family? Welcome to episode 13 of the show with no name. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo.
Kumusta, everyone?
My name is David. We're very glad that you've joined us today as we sort of start our new book. We're jumping into the book of Judges.
Yes, we are.
So those of you who've been with us through Romans, shout out to you. That was a great study. Pastor Leo led us through, and we did it. We made it. And now it's time for our next book, and we've picked Judges, as we talked about the last couple episodes, or maybe just the last episode. I can't remember if we.
It was just the last episode.
Just the last episode.
We didn't
give him any early teases or anything. So yeah, you're gonna want to be reading in Judges now. If you're like, oh shoot, I've started the podcast and I haven't read Judges yet. It's okay for today because we're we're kind of gonna get into some history, some backstory, all those things. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about are mentioned at the beginning of Judges, but so yeah, we're very excited for Judges. You might notice that my voice sounds a little bit different.
Mine too.
I am like right in the middle of being sick, and Pastor Leo is at the beginning of being sick. So you're welcome. Or maybe you're like, I can't stand David's voice, and this is better than normal. So congratulations to you if you're one of those people. But
there you go.
Just bear with us here as we're a little under the weather at the moment.
We're both going to be coughing into the mic.
I feel like I made it so far this year without like getting a really nasty like sinus infection or cold through basketball season because I just, I've a kid in daycare, a kid in kindergarten, and I coach high school basketball. Like, I'm just around disease monsters all the time. Plus, I work here with our staff, so just the word. But so usually, I get a couple bad colds or get the flu or something. And I made it so far this year. Like, real minor cold here or whatever. And now, February, I've just been hit back to back to back. It's just like, oh, man. I feel like that's like what our winter is going to be, like we got hit the one time, but it seems so nice out, and then like end of March is going to hit, and we're going to get like 6 blizzards.
That's one of the things that I noticed here. Like if the winter is not that bad, you get sick a lot.
Oh, interesting.
I think at least for us, because we're not used to this kind of weather. Yeah. So the very cold early mornings and then the warmer afternoons.
Sure, the drastic changes in temperature. So
it kind of messes us up.
Well, this has been Pastor Leo's meteorology moment. Dr. Leo telling you why you're sick this summer. Or what summer?
There's 100% chance that the sun's going to come up tomorrow morning.
I disagree, actually.
Really?
I mean, there is a chance that it does not.
Let's put it like 99.99%.
You could keep going with the nines, but it's not 100.
It's not 100.
You don't know.
That's so true.
You don't know. This book we're studying tells me that you don't know
when the sun is
not going to come up. Well, before we start talking about Judges, and just let me get my Bible up real quick. But before we get into that, you have brought some treats.
Yes. And because we're both under the weather, it's chocolate.
Perfect. Just some comfort chocolate as we feel sad.
Yes.
What do we got here, Leo?
This is
you open it. I want to
courtesy
touch your stuff
of a lady who goes to PH. You've probably heard of her. Her name is Cheryl.
I'm familiar.
You're familiar? Yeah.
Love Cheryl. Sometimes I question who she chooses to hang out with.
Yes.
Like, you got to pick better people to put. Right. Just kidding, Haniel. I love you too. So Cheryl made these, huh?
Cheryl made these. We call these chocolate crinkles.
Chocolate crinkles. They look like Christmas cookies to me.
Yes. It's covered in flour. That's why it's white. No, I'm just kidding. It's the powdered sugar kind of thing.
You're the worst.
You should have seen his face.
I'm just going to eat raw flour. Are you struggling over there a little bit, buddy?
I am struggling. You see one corner where it's already broken? There's a reason why. Like Cheryl, you could have picked a better container.
That's in my old age.
Kidding.
Tupperware is something that I've started to like.
Yes, that is true.
It's worth spending the extra money on really good Tupperware.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things where I'm like, we can buy the cheap version of this. For instance, I bought some English muffins the other day, Leo. Went to the grocery store over lunch. Yeah. And I was like, that'll be a good lunch this week. I've got peanut butter and jelly at the office. I'll buy a thing of English muffins. I forget the name, like the main name brand that just everybody knows. It was like $5.80 for a thing of English muffins.
Ooh, okay.
And then the Albertsons generic brand was like $1.25. I was like, there's no way those are 5 times better than the generic. And they weren't. I bought the generic ones and they were fine. But Tupperware is worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Spend your extra money on Tupperware. I strongly believe in that. All right. So a chocolate crinkle.
Chocolate crinkle.
Here we go. I'm trying not to get. I've already failed. I've got powdered sugar all over my black pants.
That's the fun of it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful.
It is.
Those are a problem. Is this a common cookie in the Philippines?
Yes, it is.
Well, shout out to the Philippines.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's delicious.
It is.
Well, thank you, Cheryl and Leo, for bringing them in.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's almost brownie-like.
Right.
More than a cookie.
Yes.
In terms of like texture and flavor. And then it's just smothered in powdered sugar. Oh, boy.
Would you like it as much if it were flour, though?
No, I would not. I believed you because, one, you're a pastor, and I didn't think you'd lie to me. But two, some of the things you brought in, I'm like, I would have never thought
That's true.
to do that.
That is true.
We've had coconut panda and
like avocado ice candy.
Yeah. You've had some weird options.
Mm-hmm.
So I believed you for a moment, and my excitement level dropped dramatically.
Right.
Okay.
But the cookie did redeem itself.
That is A+. I'm going to say that's the best dessert that we've had.
There you go. Cheryl, you've heard it officially here in the episode 13 of the show with no name.
I'm trying to remember. We've had the weird avocado thing.
Right.
Which I didn't hate, and I do hate avocado, so it probably is delicious. We had the driest candy
The polvoron, yeah.
of all time. Like, you were trying to kill me. Mm-hmm. What other desserts have we had? We had the thing that was wrapped in the coconut panda, which was delicious. Mm-hmm. What is it actually called?
Buko pandan.
Buko pandan. We had what was the thing that was wrapped in the
the tupig?
Yeah, tupig.
Yes.
Yeah. And I believe I said I'm more of a one pig guy.
Yes.
But I did like the two pig. That was good as well. But this is chocolate.
Yes. It pales in comparison. All
just
of
chocolate
them
is
pale
always
in comparison.
Well, thank you. That was delicious. A great way to start our study on the Book of Judges was me eating
Thank you
chocolate.
for judging.
Well, great transition right there. Usually that's my bit. Terrible transitions. Thank you. Thanks for picking me up on that one. Well, like I said at the beginning, we're going to be studying the Book of Judges. We're not going to be going as, I don't want to say as in depth because we are going in depth, but we're not going as like verse by verse deep theological breakdown of like every sentence in Judges because it's different than the Book of Romans. So we're just going to talk about some backstory, different things about the book. So why don't we start with who wrote Judges and maybe when it was written?
I don't know.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you
start.
for being here. This is going to be a really great study on the Book of Judges. You seem to know more about Romans than you do about Judges, Leo.
No idea.
Okay. That's all you got?
Yep.
You have anything else?
No, it's I don't know the both questions.
Yeah.
It's there's no definite answer, but we can make an assumption that it was written after Israel already had kings as their rulers because of the repeated phrases. You will see this repeatedly when you let's make it a when, not an if. When you read Judges, it says there repeatedly, in those days there was no king in Israel. So some say the prophet Samuel. This is just conjecture. This is just guesses. Some say the prophet Samuel compiled the stories. Others say Jewish editors or Jewish writers who came after Samuel did. But nobody today really knows for sure. Back then, of course, they knew, but it got lost.
Yeah. Most likely was written in the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom. In basically 100% of secular scholars would say that it was written in the southern kingdom. And even most Christian scholars that I was doing some research on it as we were going, and most would agree, especially because archaeologically we don't really have anything from the United Kingdom, and so we have a lot from once Jeroboam and Rehoboam kind of split the kingdom in half, and so most people think it was written in Judah, the southern kingdom, and and why is it called Judges?
Because they judged the chocolate crinkle.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was like an American Idol type situation.
That's so true. The title comes from the titles given to the nation's leaders during the period. So it was not kings or presidents or prime ministers. They were called judges.
Yeah.
So that's why they were called judges, and that's why the book is called Judges.
And if you've already read the first couple chapters, that would have been spoiled for you.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
But we're glad. Keep reading.
Yes.
But then when we first get into Judges, like the first thing we hear about is Joshua.
Yes.
Which is the book in the Bible that comes before Judges. So maybe we need to dive in a little bit into Joshua so we have some context of what's going on here.
That's true, because the book of Judges picks up after the death of Joshua. In fact, for the first chapter, it even talks about Joshua for a little bit. So Joshua was Moses' successor. Joshua is the one who led the people of Israel into the promised land. After their liberation from slavery in Egypt and after wandering in the wilderness for about 40 years, Joshua's story begins east of the Jordan River, which is the modern-day country of Jordan. The Israelites cross the river into Canaan, which is modern-day Israel. And so their task, and we can read all about it in the book of Joshua, given by God, was to conquer Canaan.
Quick before we move on, have you ever wandered for like 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Like aimlessly, like I don't know where I'm going right now. Like, that's awful.
It is.
40 years of aimless wandering in the desert and the wilderness.
That's tough.
Sounds unpleasant. But anyway.
Like for the husbands who are waiting for their wives to get done shopping, you know what it's like.
So they were supposed to conquer Canaan.
Yes.
Again, we read a little bit of the continuation of that at the beginning of Judges. But did they... What would you say? Did they conquer Canaan? I mean, they lived there.
They lived there.
So, like, kind of, maybe?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Short answer is no.
No, all right. Good job, guys.
So even before Joshua died, he already saw that this was not going to be good. So, yeah.
Joshua lived a nice long life, 110. We read it in the last chapter of the book of Judges.
That's right.
Or book of Joshua, excuse me.
Book of Joshua, yeah.
But at the end there, he gathers everybody. At the end of his life, he gathers everybody around to talk to them. What was that purpose, other than just like, hey, I'm gonna die? But like, it was probably more than just that,
right? Joshua sees one serious problem. The nation of Israel has not yet completed their task. And again, the task is to conquer Canaan, not live in Canaan, not live with the Canaanites. It was conquer Canaan. So they have not yet driven out all of the Canaanites. So Joshua gives them warning. And for us, this is more of a spoiler alert for the overarching theme of the book of Judges. To do that, we're going to quote Joshua chapter 23, verses 7 to 8, and then we're going to jump to 12 to 13. So it says there, don't have anything to do, and this is Joshua talking to the nation of Israel, to his people. So he says, don't have anything to do with these nations that remain with you. Don't invoke the names of their gods or take oaths by them. Don't serve them or worship them. Hold on to the Lord your God instead, exactly as you've done right up to today. But, and this is important, if you should turn away and join the rest of these nations that remain with you, intermarry with them, and associate with each other, then know for certain that the Lord your God won't keep on removing these nations before you. Instead, they will be a snare and a trap for you. They will be a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes until you vanish from this fertile land that the Lord your God has given you.
that's unpleasant.
It is.
Like a whip on my side sounds terrible, but thorns in my eyes might be like the worst thing I could imagine.
So true.
Thanks for that word picture, Joshua. Okay, so that's a pretty aggressive warning.
It is.
And again, a bit of a spoiler, but how'd they do with listening? And
they
taking
listened.
head of that warning.
And
Yeah,
they
listened.
drove all of
heard
the
it.
Canaanites away.
Oh, great. And everything's been perfect in that area ever since. Yeah.
Then we know that the answer to that is a no. In Joshua 24 verse 24, the people said to Joshua, "We will serve the Lord our God and we will obey him." So they were like, "Yes, we will." And then Joshua dies soon after. And then he had that great commission for the nation of Israel. Finish conquering Canaan and honor your agreement with God. So that comes with a condition. If they continue to obey God and follow his laws, the nation will continue to enjoy God's protection and blessings.
But they didn't honor their agreement with God, and they didn't finish conquering Canaan.
No, they did not.
So they lied to Joshua
Yes.
right before he died.
Yes.
It's terrible. Why?
But one can just imagine like Joshua doing a face palm kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
just up in heaven. Just
Yep.
like, come on, guys.
right. So they did not, because the people decided it was easier to live as neighbors with the Canaanites. Something that we do even today. Like, we think it's easier, so we just compromise. So they lived with the Canaanites than to fight them.
That's a tough one, though, because it's like, that seems like the right move. Like,
Yeah.
instead of murdering you, Leo, I'll just let you live next door to me. Like, that seems like the right move.
It is. It is. To be fair, it is true. We talked about this before at PH2. When it comes to God, here's the bottom line, though. We need to choose what's right over what's comfortable. Again, we need to choose what's right over what's comfortable. I know that there are times when God commands us or tells us to do something, and it's just, but God, that's tough. But we need to choose what's right over what's comfortable. We need to choose what's right over what we think is more peaceful. We need to choose what's right over what we think is easier.
Why? Like, it obviously the we're in the Old Testament, and we're pre, like, kingdom of Israel.
Yes.
Right? There's a nation of Israel, but we don't have a kingdom yet, like where we have kings ruling. So this is a very, very long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably talking like in the 12th, 13th, 14th century BC. Like, very, very long time ago. So the world's very different.
Yes.
But still, like why? Like, what? Like, that just seems like the right move. And, I understand, like, obviously, I think we all understand God's not calling me to go and attack my neighbors so I can live more peacefully, because I don't like that they're, whatever, lawn clippings come over the fence, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of a neighbor conflict. They borrowed my edge trimmer and never returned it. So I must fight them. But in this scenario, like, they're being asked to do something that seems contrary to the right, like, it seems like the right thing would be, oh no, we can find a way to coexist. So why do we need to make sure we're choosing right over what seems to us to be peaceful or comfortable or whatever?
Well, those who go to New Hope, you will remember this from Pastor. Yeah, yes. You do?
That's me.
That's awesome. There you go. Okay, so those who go to New Hope and go to PH will remember this from Pastor Mike's our run through the entire Bible when we went through the story. Mm-hmm. I still have the book. Have you read it? If you have it, I saw one in Wise Penny.
Oh no!
But anyway, God has an upper story that He is writing. That's what we talked about before. That was when we went through the 30+ weeks of the story. That's what we have always stressed. God has an upper story, and that upper story will never bend to our lower story.
Yeah.
So we see the effect of Israel's stubbornness to follow their lower story instead of trusting God and following his upper story. So one of the effects of that is the Israelites thought it was easier to live with the Canaanites as their neighbors. So, before long, the Israelites have abandoned God's laws, and we will see that. These are spoiler alerts, by the way. So, they abandoned God's laws. They started picking up Canaanite culture and religion. Yep. See, that's what they were thinking. It's a little culture here. It's a little bit of religious practice there. It's a little compromise on the side with a dash of stubbornness for a little kick.
Flour. Covered in flour. Yeah.
You cover that whole thing in flour.
If you usually skip our nonsense at the beginning, you're not going to get that reference. But
So one day they found themselves far from God. It's the same even today, and we can apply the same principle in our life. And we talked about this recently at PH as well. Almost nobody ruins their life because of just one bad decision. And if you think about it, it's true. It's usually because of small decisions, small steps, bad habits, one day at a time, over a series of years or a series of time, until one day we woke up and we found ourselves broken. It's like, where did I go wrong? It's not just one where, it's several steps that we took. And that's another lesson for us from the book of Judges. The Israelites thought it was easier to live as neighbors with the Canaanites than follow God's command to drive them away. Talked about this at PH recently too. The people we hang with often shape the habits we have. Mm-hmm. And that's why God wanted to drive the Canaanites out, because if they're going to hang with the Canaanites, that will shape the habits of the Israelites. So it's almost impossible to live the right life when you have the wrong friends. So for the people of Israel, God knows that the Canaanites were the wrong kind of friends. How wrong? Very wrong.
Yeah, let's talk about the Canaanites a little bit. Because it sounds like, okay, the Canaanites, so that, we have the Egyptians, we've got the Hittites and the Assyrians and the Israelites, so then we've got the Canaanites. But they were not, the Canaanites were not like a nation of people.
Right.
It was a whole bunch of different people groups.
A lot of people groups.
Yep, all in that area. We know a fair amount about them because of different historical records from Egypt and other areas around there. Like there's archaeological history of the Canaanites, references to the Canaanites that predate references to the Israelites, obviously before the Exodus out of Egypt and everything. And but yeah, there was a lot of you brought up culture. There's a lot of culture in that area that would have been very influential on the people of Israel. I mean, we're not getting into Samuel and kings and things like that, but like even just the idea of having a king, like that wasn't unique to the Canaanites, but we see that influence on the Israelites after Judges.
Yep.
Spoiler alert, they don't have judges forever. Eventually they're like, everyone around us has a king, we want a king.
Imagine who that everyone around us would be.
Yeah. Yep. But there were so many different practices that would have been very contrasting to the law of Moses and what God had for the Israelites.
And one of the things too, it's not like they were they were living like their life peacefully, and they were also following God. They had one of the very famous ones is their worship of the god Molech.
Yep.
Which is very okay. If you have children with you, please ask them to do something, because we're going to talk about Molech for a bit.
Skip ahead a few minutes.
Right. One of the things that they did was when they worshipped the god Molech, they would heat up a bronze statue of a beast with its arms outstretched, and they would sacrifice their kids by putting them on those arms. So they would literally
roast their children.
And one of the things that they did was, because of course the kids would start screaming and crying, they would beat their drums harder and louder just to drown out the sounds of that. So that's one of the things that they did. That's just one. There were a lot of gods that they worshipped, and most, if not all of them, involved sacrifice in one way or another, and it's just dark. And imagine the influence of that kind of religious practice, tradition, and culture to the kind of people that God is trying to mold the Israelites to be.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting period of history. You brought up Molech there. Baal or Baal, however you say it, is another one of the most famous gods from that area. That and honestly, he was in more than just Canaan. I mean, he was up in Assyria, and his influence was kind of all over the place. But this time period in history is a extremely important time period. It's known as the Bronze Age collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Then archaeology, like it always does, catches up when they're like, okay, well, it is true, but whatever. But the Bronze Age collapse was a time where all of these massive powers in this area, Egypt and Assyria, and other ones as well, just had a sudden and rapid decline in power and influence.
Right.
And it coincides with Israel's rise in Canaan. The peoples from the sea are written about a lot. They're one of my favorite things in history because we still just don't have specifics on who they were, where they came from, why they were doing the things they were doing. But it is widely accepted that the Philistines were at least one of the people groups of the peoples of the sea. They completely decimated Egypt and Assyria. Assyria collapses at this time, and we get Neo-Assyria, it's known as, which eventually leads to Babylon taking over, which we learn a whole lot about in the Old Testament.
Yay, Babylon!
Yeah, but it's just such a fascinating time of all these cultures mashing together. Like Canaan had been under the influence of Egypt before this. It was kind of not a vassal state because it wasn't just one state, but basically all of those places were subservient to Egypt because Egypt was so powerful. And at times Assyria and Egypt, they're fighting and trying to take control over these areas. Well, obviously Egypt is in decline at this point, and it's allowing Israel to rise into power. But all of these different cultures are like battling for supremacy. Not just the actual wars to like, okay, I'm going to fight Leo so I can live here. But all of our cultures and all of our religions that were all mashed into this poor little area between these two mighty powers, that's happening too. And we see the Israelites just fold under that pressure of we're just gonna assimilate, and we're gonna it's gonna be okay if some of the things that they do and they like that are completely contrasting to what God wants for us, we're gonna let some of those in. Right. And then we see the effect, right? What's the effect of the Israelites not driving the Canaanites out?
Well, they get locked into a cycle.
Not a good one either. Not like what a great routine, brush my teeth, take a shower, get to work, come home, hang out with the kids. That's not a good one.
Unfortunately, it wasn't like that. Yeah. What would happen is they would sin, and then God would punish them, and then they would repent, and then God would forgive them, and it's usually in the form of sending someone to save them,
like a judge.
A judge.
Crazy.
What? So he would send a judge, a savior, a hero to save them, and then a few years later they would forget all about it. The next generation usually would forget all about it, and then the cycle repeats itself. So by the end, anarchy had taken over. So this is, spoiler alert, this is the book of Judges in a nutshell. So by the end, anarchy had taken over. So here's the bottom line for the entire book. And before we do that, I just thought about something. The reason Egypt suddenly had lost its power And during this time is because, think about it, what happened a few years before was all of the plagues. And then their armies got decimated because they got buried underwater when all of that water collapsed and all of that stuff. And I think God's plan would have been, if they had followed, was because of that decline in power, and then they would have a positive influence on the nations around them, and it would have been great. But because they did not obey, yay, we got judges. But anyway, here's the bottom line for the entire book. God never gives up on his people, including us today, when they sin, when we sin, which is something that they and we repeatedly do. And you will see this when we go through Judges formally. God punishes them by sending oppressors to remind them of their need to keep obeying God. But every time the Israelites repent and ask God for help, he never fails to deliver. So here are your questions for this. I know it's just we're just talking about the backstory, but there are questions that we can think of. So number one, even though God commanded them to, the Israelites did not drive out the inhabitants of the promised land because they thought it was easier to live as neighbors than to fight them. So the question is, what lessons should we learn regarding our own service to God about this? Second, in their refusal to heed God's command, in what sense were the Israelites forsaking God? In the same way, what lessons should we learn regarding our own service to God? Again. And then here's your third one. Is the cycle that the nation of Israel repeated throughout the history of the Judges, is that something that we still see today? If so, what lessons should we learn regarding our own service to God? Again. So this is all about our own service to God, in reflection about what happened to the Israel and how they failed to listen to God.
And then next episode, we're going to jump into Judges. So we said this last time, but Judges 1 through Judges 3, verse 6, which sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
But it's not.
It's not.
And also, I live 5 minutes from the church. So here's a little peek behind the curtain for all of you back home. We were supposed to record this last week.
Yes.
But I've been sick, as we discussed, and then I have been traveling with basketball. So things got crazy. So I was all prepared for this podcast last week, and we weren't able to record. And then I didn't read Judges over the weekend. So this morning I was like, I want to refresh myself before we record. So as I jumped into the car, I opened the Bible app and I pressed play on Judges 1. And by the time my 5-minute drive was here, all of those verses had been read to me in 5 minutes.
There you go.
So take 5 minutes and let the Bible app read it to you before next week.
It's not as bad as
it's really not. It's not. And honestly, this, like, the first chapter might be the toughest, because there's just a whole bunch of names that you don't know and you're like, what is going on? Or maybe even the second chapter a little bit. But even then, it's really not that difficult. You don't need to feel bad if you don't know every name that's being mentioned. That's not a big deal. But yeah, read those verses. Come back for next time. You have a Cliff Notes in here. Would you like to offer that up?
If you really don't have that 5 minutes, which is, again, please, time. It's 5 minutes.
Make time for God's word.
But if you really don't have time, one of the best ways for you to understand what we're going to be talking about is to just read Judges chapter 2, verse 1 to 23. That's shorter. It's not as bad. But, again, it's just 5 minutes. Yeah. But if you really don't have the time, it's Judges 2, verses 1 to 23.
And which is that's the whole book of Judges 2, correct? Yeah. So it's 23 verses.
Yes, it's just 23 verses.
But it's really not that much more to read the whole thing. So I recommend you read the whole thing. We're going to go through this study of Judges together, just like we did in Romans. I know for a lot of people that study on Romans was really, really helpful, really beneficial. You're teaching on it, Leo. It was for me as well. So let's stay committed to being in the Word with Judges as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Leo. I'm excited
are
to dive
welcome.
in the next episode. Thanks to all of you for joining us. New episodes go live every single Wednesday. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done that yet, either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/New Hope Here. I think that's all of my bits. Once again, I apologize for my voice. Again, unless you like this more than my normal voice, and then you're welcome. I'll try to keep this cold as long as possible. We love you, New Hope family, and we will see you next time.
Ingat.